What do Donald Trump, Grant Cardone, and Harry Triguboff all have in common? Unlike 95% of the Australian population, they built millions of dollars worth of wealth using property as an investment tool during their 20s, which was then able to give them freedom, financial stability, and fuck you money. What's the difference between these people and the 95% of Australians that slave away working their 9 to 5 until one day they hope to retire but usually die before it? The 5% of the population educate themselves, they expand their network, and they execute on the learnings. I can help you with the first two, and by the end of this video, you'll be well on your way to go and execute what you have learned. So the question is, are you ready? And if you are, then let's get started. Now, Donald Trump, Grant Cardone, and Harry Triguboff are all well-renowned billionaire property investors, developers, and business people. But they all didn't start like that. It all starts with one very simple step, which is if you don't know something, you have to go and get educated on that topic. And it's exactly what I did when I got started on my investing journey. I grew up in a normal neighborhood in the suburbs of Western Sydney in Australia, and I grew up in a family that knew very little about money and wealth creation, which is very, very normal. But I wanted fuck you money, so I knew I had to learn how to actually be able to get that. And for myself, the first place that I started was education. Without education and without knowing something, it is very hard to do anything. And with education, I've now been able to grow my own property portfolio to almost $40 million before the age of 30. And the way that I started to educate myself on a topic that I knew absolutely nothing about was I completely eliminated my ego. And what I see time again from people that I educate now is people come into a conversation when they actually know nothing about a topic, pretending like they know something because they're afraid of knowing nothing. But the first step to actually being able to learn and get educated so you can start making progress is to just accept the fact that before you are able to know something, everyone starts with knowing nothing. And if you remove your ego from the situation, which is exactly what I did, you can just accept that you know very little and that every bit of information that you hear about a certain topic is new, and you can take that on board, as opposed to going into something with this frame of mind that, oh, what am I going to learn here? What's this person going to be able to teach me that I don't already know? Which is what so many people do when they go and learn about something, because it's a protection mechanism. And what I also found is when I started to learn from people and I went into a conversation or I went into a room that was filled with people that I was going to be learning from, and I was very honest and open and raw with saying, I know very little about this certain topic, I want to learn everything I possibly can, I found that people were more accepting that I didn't know anything and were actually wanting to teach me more because I was being humble as opposed to being like most people are, which is pretending like they know more than what they do and having opinions on something that they actually know very little about. So the first step before you can actually go and get educated on something is to just accept that you are going to know very little to nothing about it, and you need to remove your ego completely from the situation. Now, the second thing that I did to be able to educate myself is to just know that I'm starting from zero. Now, just like when you're learning to ride a bike, when you're starting to ride a bike, you're not thinking about, let's go and jump off that curb over there and let's go on that BMX track and do all the really exciting stuff before you've learnt the fundamentals of riding a bike, which is get on the bike, start being able to use the pedals, then remove your training wheels, etc. So it starts from the fundamentals of learning that subject. And that's exactly what I needed to do when I started to learn about things that I had no idea about. You're learning a language like English, for example. You know, before we start learning about words, we start to learn about letters. So when I was learning about property and investing, I didn't focus on how do I become Donald Trump, or how do I become Grant Cardone, or how do I become Harry Triguboff? It was, what are the fundamental things that I need to learn right now, which is going to then get me on that journey to be able to get to that level. What a lot of people do when they are learning about a new subject is they don't learn the fundamentals. They just want to start at page 10 of a 10-page journey and get into the really exciting stuff. And often when people do that, it actually costs them a significant amount of time and a significant amount of money because they jump way further ahead than their education allows them to, and it usually ends in tears. So one of the key things that I focus on is start from zero, learn the absolute basics, the fundamentals, and get the foundations correct. Before then, you build off those foundations to start going into more complex topics around that subject. And then the third thing that I did to be able to educate myself around property and investing is I found one mentor. I found one person who was doing what I wanted to do, who had the lifestyle that I wanted to have, and who aligned with the way that I thought about the world. And for the next 5 to 7 years, I literally consumed every piece of that person's content that was out there in the ether, and I wanted to learn every intricacy of that person's strategy, the way that they had gone about their own journey, the way that they thought about things. And it really helped me understand the subject matter much better than if I was trying to learn a little bit off this person, a little bit off that person, a little bit off that other person, who all had very different life experiences, very different strategies that may or may not have aligned with the way that I had thought. Now, when people think about mentors, and I get asked this all the time, like, how do I go find a mentor? Or Jack, will you be my mentor? Having a mentor, from my point of view, isn't about having someone who says, yes, I will mentor you. It's essentially about having someone, whether that be physically or digitally, that you can constantly refer back to be able to get the answers to the questions that you need at that point in time. If you are trying to get the answer to a question that you have about a specific thing, instead of trying to search the ether for that answer, you just simply refer back to this person and their journey to try and find a point in that journey where they had a similar problem and they found the answer, and that is what you can then implement and execute in your own journey. And I think once you've learned as much as you possibly can and consumed as much as you possibly can from that mentor, whether it be digital or physical, that's when you can potentially start to look at other mentors. Eventually you will get to a point where you've consumed everything and you've learned everything or majority of what that person can teach you. And then I think it's time to find that next mentor who can then take you to that next level. So then once I used those last 3 steps, I educated myself, I then needed to get myself around the right network. And the first thing that I did was I looked around at the people that I was surrounding myself with at that point in time, and I just asked myself this very simple question. Do I want to be more and more like these people as I go further into my life, or do I want to be less and less like these people as I go further into my life? And what I realized is the people that I was surrounding myself with, I was surrounding myself with because it was convenient, not because it was inspiring. So what I focused on then was I focused on how do I then start to hang around better people who are not necessarily further along the journey than me, but are more aligned to the journey that I want to have on my life. So I started to upgrade my circle, and this is not an easy thing to do. I obviously had to start to cut relationships. I had to start hanging out with people less and less that I had been hanging out for, 5, 10, 15 years of my life. But it was a necessary thing, because there is that saying that I'm sure most people have heard, which is you become the average of the 5 closest friends that you hang around. And I did not want to be the average of those people. Now, the easiest way that I found to be able to find people who are on the same journey as me was as I started to go to events and as I started to put myself in scenarios where there were other people who were interested in the same topics as me, I then just naturally started to find more people that were into similar things that I was into and that wanted similar things for their lives that I wanted. Now, this was deliberate. I didn't just happen to fall into these friendships. I put myself in environments where these people were likely to be hanging. I mean, if you think about how you meet the majority of your friends right now, it usually happens in school, which is when you are in an environment where other people like you are hanging out, which is other people similar to your age who live in a similar location to you. So if you use that same concept and go, well, how do I meet other people who are into the same things I am and want similar things right now? You need to put yourself in the environment where those people hang out. And for property and investing, it are things like seminars and webinars and personal development events and those kinds of places where those kinds of people hang out. When I started to find more and more of these people, what I then started to uncover is that because these people were achieving bigger things than I was achieving, they were keeping themselves accountable, they were doing more with their lives, what I just naturally started to do was increase the standards of my life. I had more discipline. I started to create bigger goals. I wanted more for myself because the people around me were doing those things, and that naturally lifted up my ability to be able to go after those things as well. And on top of that, I also was able to get educated even further from people who were doing things that I wasn't, that I wanted to be doing. Now, the other amazing thing that started to happen when I put myself in these circles of people is that my team started to grow around me. Now, when you are investing in property, when you are growing your wealth, it's not a one-man band show. You need to have lots of people around you who can support you and can provide different things along the journey, which becomes essentially your core team. Very similar to a football team. Everyone has their key role inside of that team that doesn't do something at every point in the game, but when they are called on, they have a very specific role that they need to perform, and it's no different with property and wealth creation. So I then started to find people like mortgage brokers and accountants and lawyers, and a lot of these people I still work with today. The first lawyer that I ever met, which was on a boat in Sydney Harbour, is still my lawyer today inside of my organization and does all of my property stuff. And that relationship was built because I put myself in an environment where people like him were going to be. And this also ties back to removing your ego from the scenario, because when you remove your ego from the scenario, what you realize is, although you may think you know stuff, in the grand scheme of it, you know very little, especially when you compare it to the experts that work in that field. So as I started to meet all of these people who were experts in their specific field, and I would talk to them about things and they would explain it like they were experts, because they were, I then started to humble myself even more, realizing that I know very little. But again, I need to put myself in these scenarios so I was able to grow my circle and then grow my team. And one of the key things that I learned as I started to grow my circle of friends and grow my team is that it needs to be a give and take relationship, not just a take relationship, which may not sound new to a lot of people, right? It's no different to a relationship that you might have with your spouse. If you just take from the relationship, you won't have a relationship for very long, and you won't have a very fruitful relationship. So I always thought to myself, how can I add value to these people's lives who don't necessarily even need the value that I'm going to give them because they probably already get it from elsewhere, but I wanted to always be the person who was offering more than I was taking. And I think a lot of people get confused with this step because they think, well, what have I got to offer? I don't know as much as them. I don't have as much money as them. I don't have as much resources as them. What can I really offer these people? And I see the things online all the time where it's like, hey, can I come and get you coffees for you? Or hey, can I come and do this for you or do that for you? When the reality is, doing something for someone doesn't necessarily mean that thing is going to be valuable to them. So I always thought about, what does this person see a lot of value in? For example, it might have been the person was saying that they want to get healthy and fit again. So me saying to them, hey, do you want to go for a run tomorrow? Was a valuable thing to someone because they want to get healthy and they want to get fit, and they probably don't have a lot of people around them who are encouraging them to get healthy and fit. And when someone like me says, hey, let's go for a run, running's free, doesn't cost me anything, and it gets them out of their house and gets them aligned to their goal. And all of a sudden now you could be on a run with someone for 30 or 60 or 90 minutes. And again, you're building relationship and you're adding value to their lives. And I think what was really key was always approaching the situation or relationship with, what can I offer you, as opposed to what can I get out of this relationship. And what I also found is that the more I did for other people, the more value I added, naturally, the more that other people started to do for me. And now the most important piece of the puzzle. It's actually the piece of the puzzle that the 95% of people get stuck on the most, and that is the execution piece. You can't go and build your knowledge base, get an incredible network, learn a lot, put yourself in situations where you can be successful, but not execute on those situations or those learnings. And one thing that I have seen in my own life happen over and over and over again is that you always need to act before you are ready. Every single thing that I have done before it has felt like the right time. When I bought my first property, it didn't really feel like the right time. I wasn't 100% sure that it was the right property. I didn't know what I didn't know, but I made it happen. Before I left my job and started my business, it didn't feel like the right time. There were still things I was unsure about. I wasn't 100% committed, but I did it before I was ready and I made it work. Before I ran my first 100-mile run, I didn't feel like I had trained enough. I didn't know the track at all. I'd never studied on how to run these overnight 25, 26-hour races. But I got out there and I made it happen and I executed. And the thing with executing is it's actually the fastest way to learn, because when you execute, you get real life learnings. It's not hypotheticals. It's not from someone else's experience. It's by you doing and you learning by doing the doing. Because the reality is you can analyze and try and work out all the different variables and how things are going to unfold if this or that happens, but you don't actually know until you do it. The worst case scenario generally is not that bad, and the best case scenario is generally significantly better than what you think it actually can be. And there's a saying which says the best time to start was yesterday and the second best time to start is right now. And if you want to make sure you achieve nothing in your life, always start tomorrow, which essentially represents just execute as soon as you can. But in saying that, you need to break down the thing that you are executing on. When I bought my first property, I didn't think about a $35 million, $40 million portfolio. I just thought about property number one. And it didn't then get overwhelming. I just focused on the things that I could control. And all of a sudden, by buying property number one, it led me to property number two. By buying property number two, it led me to property three, and so on and so on. Same as when I'm starting a business. I didn't start a business going, fuck, I'm gonna have $150,000 a week payroll. I just started a business with starting a business, and then you start to grow and learn as you go along. So it's very important that when you do execute, you chunk down what you are executing on and just make sure you execute on the small things that matter every single day, and don't focus too heavily on all the big things that you want to achieve. And then if you stay consistent with that execution every single day, that is what then helps you get to those big things. I mean, if I think back now, it's been 10 years since I bought my first property. I don't really remember what's happened over that 10-year journey every single day of the 10 years. I remember the big milestones. I remember the good things that happened. I remember some of the bad things that have happened. But the reality is it just gets bundled into one big thing and you don't remember the majority of it. But the key is just staying consistent, and over time you start to get the compounding effect, and from small things, big things grow. A really relevant example is actually content. When I first recorded my first piece of content, I had less than 1,000 followers on Instagram. I would have got less than 500 views on my first video. And if I would have thought about, oh wow, I want to have hundreds of thousands of followers one day and get hundreds of thousands or millions of views on videos, I probably never would have stayed consistent, because it took so long to get my first 2,000 or 3,000 followers, let alone hundreds of thousands of followers. But every single year that I stuck with it and I posted once or twice or 3 times a day for 365 days, I got to the end of that year and I reflected back and go, wow, we've had a lot of growth. And then the following year, more growth, following year, more growth. And all of a sudden now, it's much easier to stay consistent because you then see the results. I mean, I've just started creating YouTube videos, and if I look at how much time and effort I put into creating a YouTube video versus what I put into other platforms now, and the reward I get for each of them, YouTube does not make any sense. But I know that in 10 years' time, I'll look back on this and go, wow, that was worthwhile. But I'll never get that thought of, wow, that was worthwhile, if I don't stay consistent from now until then to be able to get the compounding effect. And it's no different from running or anything like that. When you run your first 5Ks, a marathon feels like forever. When you run your first marathon, you think, how am I going to run 100 miles? It's just about staying consistent and doing the doing every single day. So the question is, what can you do today? What can you take away from this video and go and implement in your life? Well, the reality is, by watching this video, you're already doing the first thing. You're educating yourself, which is the key. And by learning something, you need to go and then execute on that thing to be able to bring it into reality. If the thing that you're trying to learn about is wealth creation and money and property, which I'm assuming is why you're watching my videos, the way that you can start to grow your network and the people that you hang around is by starting to go to property events, wealth creation events, seminars, all that type of stuff. And I can assure you that you will find people that are similar to you, that are wanting the same things, that are actually going to support you along the way. And the easiest way to do that is just jump on Google and Google these things. And then the way you can execute on that is buy a ticket or get a free ticket and go there and start learning more and executing more on what you are learning. And then you want to rinse and repeat that over and over again until you start to get the compounding effect like I have. So as we wrap up the video, it's time to execute. When you get off this video, don't just put the laptop down or the computer down and go and get on with your day. Finish the video and actually go and execute on something straight away. Literally close the video down and go and execute and start that pattern of momentum, because I can assure you, if you do something right now, your future self will thank you for it.